First thing that I like to do, and this is just so I can get it on tape and I also set my audio levels, is just get your name first and last and the correct spelling.
Okay.
Okay?
All set?
Yes, sir.
My name is Thomas L. Westbrook.
Westbrook?
Correct.
All right. Where were you born?
Little place called Rising, Arkansas. That's about 70 miles from Little Rock, Arkansas,
Okay.
kind of southwest.
I've only been to Arkansas once, and I flew into Little Rock and went to Hardy. Anywhere near Hardy, Arkansas?
No,
It's about this big, I think.
that's typical of some of those little towns down there. Yeah, that's the way it is. By the time you read the front of it and say entering whatever, then you drive right by and that same sign said leaving.
How big a family? Brothers and sisters?
It was just two of us, brothers and sisters. I had one sister, and she passed last March.
Oh, really?
But my biological family, wife and myself, we have 11 kids.
Now, how are you looking so young for having 11
Well,
kids?
I give the credit to the good Lord.
Boy, I tell you, that's great.
Doing my best to stay out of trouble, to observe the guidelines that He gives us for our tenure in this life, and I come out like I am.
I was going to say, you must be doing well. You must have followed the rules.
Did my best. Human, made some terrible mistakes, but thank God that He's a forgiving God.
That's part of being human, isn't it?
That's right.
Huh. So did you grow up in Arkansas then, or did you move out fairly young?
I grew up until I was drafted for World War II. The latter part of my 18th year, I was inducted into the Army and trained over on the East Coast, Fort Meade, Maryland, basic training, and then advanced training, Camp Pickett, Virginia, and from there to Europe.
Wow. Had you ever been out of Arkansas before joining the Army?
I've been to Missouri, as far as Missouri. and I think my early childhood, we did some time down in Louisiana, but that's the extent of the travel.
Wow. Huh. So do you remember hearing about Pearl Harbor?
I can tell you exactly where I was when the news broke for us of Pearl Harbor. We have a religious convention once per year, and it used to convene November 25 and go through December 15. I was 17 years old, and I was attending that meeting when the news broke, December 7, 1941.
What type of impact did that have on you?
Being 17 years old, I didn't know all the ramifications, couldn't imagine it, but I had this feeling that pretty soon Uncle Sam was going to induct into service because I'd like in just a few months becoming 18. And so the selective service was already in motion. So I figured it wouldn't be too long before I'd be in the Army.
Wow. Did you get a letter, or how did you get notified that your service was required?
Oh yeah, you get that. We call it your greetings. You get the selective service mail your notice, and also the date for you to come in for your examination. And from there, rest of it's history. If you pass, they give you a brief stay at home, a few days, and then you have your assignment placed where you're supposed to report for training. My case was there's a camp, an old standard camp in Arkansas right out of Little Rock called Camp Robinson, Arkansas, Camp Robinson. That was just right out of Little Rock. So that was.
And what was that like? I mean, here you are, a 17, 18-year-old kid, pretty young, and the world's changing on you.
My mom didn't understand it, and as I look back at it now, I guess I reacted like any other youngster that here it is, all of a sudden he's going to get adult status and recognition. I wanted to go. I really wanted to go. When I returned back from the medical examination, Mom was anxious. She said, "Did you pass?" I said, "Of course I passed." She looked at me and said, "Of course I passed. Who wants to be a 4F?" See, that was a reject, you know. Yes, so I wanted to go.
Did any of your friends end up going with you, or?
Not necessarily close friends, but close by people that you could identify with. Say they was in the peak of drafting then, say, so every young person of that age category, expected sooner or later to be called. So it was a lot of us there. Not too far apart, but a lot of us was there.
Was it segregated when you got drafted, or was it combined at that? I mean. Yes,
it was segregated, severely segregated. Yeah, severely segregated. But the introduction provided a breath of fresh air for a period there. Everybody was just, all of us was excited, you get it all, but didn't last very long. Things settled down to what was the norm there. You were definitely segregated. I mean, it was definitely segregated.
Barracks, meal hall.
Mm-hmm. While we're in that, I guess maybe I should share with you that it would be an all-black unit, and you could make grade as a non-commissioned officer, but no blacks was commissioned in my outfit. Your commissioned officers from lieutenant up, second lieutenant up, they were white. But from the first sergeant down, and occasionally we'd have a black warrant officer, all the non-commissioned officer slots, you could make that rank, but that was it. I had a picture, and because it was blown up so big, I didn't bring it in, but I have it out there in the car. Maybe when we have an intermission, you want to take a look at it, I'll show it to you. It's right out there in the car. And this picture was taken when we finished our basic training. And you'll see the picture, how it is right away. All blacks and about 4 white officers.
It's interesting because growing up and reading the history books, my view of World War II was, America came together. Mm-hmm. And we all went for a common cause, but yet there was part of it that didn't come together.
No, definitely. We trained separately like that. We was at the same camp, but we never trained together. And then we went into combat like that. We went into combat like that. My outfit, which was trucking regiment, consists of 12 companies. That was the pattern. All of us were black, but the commissioned officers. Company commander, etc., platoon commander, all was white. And we fought like that. I mean, we did what we had to do, and yet under those ridiculous conditions, there was a sense of pride. I had a lot of pride wearing the uniform of my country, although in those terrible situations, every once in a while, somebody would tell you, you don't have a country. What are you fighting for? My country. You don't have a country. But still that element of pride prevailed. You can't explain it. It's just there. And of all of the negative things that happen, heartbreaking negative things happen, you overcome it. You definitely overcome it.
So when you left the U.S., was your troop known as the Red Ball Express?
Oh, no. That was born, that Red Ball Express concept was born after the beachheads were pretty well secured. So we weren't in the first wave of invasion. We went about D+10. I don't know, it was 8 days that lapse, say that would be, D-Day was June 6th, so what, about D+14. We went in about 8 days later. And we did temporary service with the First Army, General Bradley. They were hiding Pat out yet. He was trying to overcome that stuff about slapping those shell-shocked soldiers in Italy and Sicily, and they kind of demoted him, like didn't take any rank from him, but kind of took his command, and then they hid him out in England, and we knew before we crossed the channel that we were a part of the Third Army, but for whatever reason, they kept Patton back. I think I understand some of the reason. Patton was a blitz man, and they had to wait and kind of secure things, get the beachhead secured, and so on like that before they unleash him. So we did temporary service for the First Army, the early days of the invasion, hiding out in the hedgerows, and then all of a sudden they brought Pat across the channel, and he hooked up with his army, and he brought a lot of stuff with him, but those of us that had preceded him joined him, because that was our army in the first place. But with Bradley, we was just doing some temporary stuff. And as the battle progressed, they liberated Cherbourg, right down on Normandy Beach there. And then finally, we liberated Paris. Well, the Blitz was in effect, and Patton's a tank man, and he's just busting wide open. Hard to keep him supplied with gas and et cetera. So then the Red Ball Express was born. Give these fellows priority. See, zoom in, say, because you did have, once you got established, you did have MPs around. So the MPs couldn't touch them, wide open. This was to keep Patton supplied. All of our organization, all 12 of the companies, did not become Red Ball Express. It was a few selected ones. Some become Red Ball, and then there were others that was attached to armor divisions. 12, my company was 3910. 3912 was attached to the 5th Armored Division. So that was their job, escorted by half-tracks and getting the supplies from the pickup point where we would take it to. These guys come back and get it, escorted by half-tracks, and take it to the tankers. So a few of us was selected for Red Ball. I must admit to you that I get a little disturbed when you see Hollywood's version of Red Ball. That's far removed from the truth. Red Ball operated different to that. They did their heroics and their exploits, but it wasn't like they showed. Our boys drove the trucks. We didn't load the cans of gas. We'd load those trucks 150% overload. And it was other service battalion fellows that loaded the trucks. We provided the driving from one point to the other. Sometime you don't get to your destination. You run upon a unit that was in need of that gas, and you, without a requisition, you just give it to them and head back to get some more.
It's a fascinating part of the war because a lot of people, the history books, don't really say how much material had to be moved. Like you said, the gas, the tanks, food, things coming and going.
That's it. In
a new country you just landed in. I don't know how you guys knew where you were going.
You didn't. A lot of times you didn't. We had one guy make the wrong turn in the early days there, and he wound up in the hands of the Germans. And we never saw him anymore until the war was over. Then he come back to our unit. Unhurt. They hadn't tortured him. He just made the wrong turn right off the beach, and summer of 44 was real dry in France, a lot of dust. And you're trying to follow the leader, blackout, you know. You don't have no lights on, just a little cat's eye, as we call it. You could cloud of dust separates you from the truck in front of you. You guessed your turn, and sometimes you guess what's wrong. You wind up in the hands of the other. So saying sometimes, you know, you don't see how we knew where we were going. A lot of times we didn't know where we were going.
What was a day like?
Pardon?
What was a day like? I mean,
A day?
yeah. I know it wasn't 8 to 5.
No, it's all day, all night. Well, it's common for a soldier to be deprived of shaving and taking baths. So we certainly were subjected to that. It was no rules. So you got to take time out and how you eat. We got upset with the British because they would take time out for tea. And we didn't take time out for nothing. You eat on the run, and maybe you have a little lull. You come by a creek. You jump in there and try to refresh yourself by, you know, washing up. But there was no time. You just nonstop, and you get your little rest when there was a lull.
So if you were sitting in your cab and you were waiting for a truck, you might get a little cat nap once in a while, or?
Yeah, that's where you do it. Speaking of that, when the Germans broke through in Belgium, called it the Battle of the Bulge of the Ardennes Forest, Pat made us turn our lights on. Said we'd been operating for months, blackout. But to speed up the time, he made us turn our lights on. And that gives a fighter pilot, that's his dream, you know, see old street light. So we absorbed casualties in that. But you're speaking of kidnapping, see, the convoys were so long, they didn't properly brief us, they didn't have time. You just followed the leader. We were switching from the Saar Valley, where Pat was at war, to back up the 101st around Bastogne. And we drove, and he told them, everybody was surprised when he said among the big boys, they needed somebody to do some neck break stuff to get up there and relieve the 101st. Patton told him, give him a timetable, told him when he could do it. Nobody believed it, but he proved it, said, made us put our lights on. Now, long convoys at night, driving all night, and you just follow the leader. And we stopped periodically because they were strafing us, and we have to jump out of your trucks and try to run for cover, bomb crate or shell crate or something. And this time the fella way up in the column went to sleep. And we'd been sitting there for, I guess, an hour or more, waiting for the convoy to move. And now you do a little catnapping. And finally, here come a soldier back and knocked on the door, truck I was in, said, "Do anybody here know where we're going?" I said, "No, man." I said, what's going on? He said, the guy then went to sleep and said, "We don't know how long the convoy has been gone." I said, "Oh, my God." Well, I had a little rank. I was sergeant, so responsibility is mine to try to find out something. So I went combing the convoy, trying to find out was anybody there had any idea where we're going. And poor Lieutenant Carpenter, I don't know whether he's preceded me in death, but he'd hate for me to tell this. He was in a Jeep with his chauffeur, covered up head and ears. So they said, I asked the driver, I said, "Man, anybody been briefed here? You know where we're going?" But he said, "Here's Lieutenant Carpenter." Maybe I shouldn't call his name because I don't know what you're going to do with this film. But anyhow, the lieutenant, he said, "Here's here." I woke him up. He uncovered. I said, "I don't know where I'm going, Lieutenant." I said, where do I go? He briefed me, told me, you're going to a place called Gooby, about 8 kilometers out of away from Bastogne. He said, that's where we're supposed to go and wait for orders. I said, oh, I'm so glad that you're here. I said, I've been trying to lead this thing since we found out we was lost. I said, would you assume the leadership? He said, no, Sarge, carry on. You're doing okay. And that's the way it was on the rest of the convoy. Not trying to play hero or anything like that, but you do what you have to do. So we made it.
So how long might a convoy be?
It shouldn't be. In combat conditions, you should restrict it to maybe 8 or 15 vehicles for, protection from the aerial attack. But under those extreme conditions, I don't know how many trucks I don't know how many vehicles we had of all description. I don't know how many we had, just a long river of them, And German pilots had a field day. They had a field day. But that's the way it was. You sleep when you can. That's typical for soldiers during combat.
Because you would drive out, deliver whatever, drive back.
That's right.
Something. Right.
They had distribution depots, as they call it. Truckers would go back to where the bulk of once we got established, where the bulk of the supplies would come. He'd get loaded, and he would advance to as close to where the action was, as they felt was, and then the guys that needed the stuff would come back this little distance back to this distribution point, or this depot, and pick it up. You keep it supplied. Not only supplies like food and gas, but men pick up replacement troops, take them up, feed them into action.
And vice versa, I assume? Were you also bringing bodies back?
They had others to do that. We did do it. Yeah, we did it. We had bodies stacked up.
So by now you're all, 19 years old, 20 years old?
I turned 20 in England. See, we arrived in England in March of '44, and took up barracks in a little place out of Liverpool called, Stoke-on-Trent, I think that's what they call it. And we were there until the invasion started, and we got going.
Was it scary for you when you're driving the truck, or is it a different mindset you're in?
It's difficult to explain. Yeah, you're scared. Yes, you're scared. You have to really turn to be something else, not to be scared. Yeah, you're scared. Definitely scared. But you do what you have to do. And how you condition yourself, I can't explain it. I can't explain it. First few days you can't eat, but you adapt.
Did you have contact with home, with your mom?
That was difficult. Censorship for security purposes were extremely severe. You write a letter and they erase what they don't want it to say and reduce it to about a 4x4, little photograph, little photostack. And at that time, during the early days of the invasion, you couldn't express how you felt. They'd erase all that out and then take a picture of it. Then your mom or your relative may not get it for 3 weeks. That's the way it was.
That had to be extremely hard on families.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Terribly hard.
never knowing where they are. You hear the different newsreel stories or whatever, and rumors. And
Right. You could see them somewhere in France. Once you get to Luxembourg, I'm somewhere in Luxembourg. You get to Belgium, somewhere in Belgium. Get to Germany, I'm somewhere in Germany. And that's as close as you could pinpoint it. Otherwise, they scratch it all out.
did you have a vehicle assigned to you, or were you always driving different rigs? Or
By me being a non-commissioned officer, a sergeant, I had a section, as they call it, that is about 16, let's see, four, about 8 vehicles. And then, of course, I would only drive when it was necessary. So you have the driver there, and then every vehicle have 2 people, and they alternate. That's the way it was. You did have a specific vehicle. My truck, my lead truck, that drove point was truck number 40, and that's where I drive all the time. I'd help my driver on extreme conditions. I lost that boy. I lost him. They got him.
how do you deal with that as a young person, losing people to war?
Can't explain it. You're there, and you do what you have to do. You're trying to survive, but you do what you have to do. I can't explain it. I really can't.
What did you guys talk about? Can you remember conversations?
Talk about home. Boys had girlfriends, talk about their girlfriends. I married before I went over, so I married. I'm not sure. I ain't gonna talk too much about my wife because the guys, they make you mad because they'd say something bad about your wife, you know. Yeah. Old Jody is back there making time with her, man. She's got herself a boyfriend. You're crazy if you think she's waiting for you. See, that kind of stuff. So you don't talk to him about your wife.
So even over there, they'd be dissing on you.
Oh, yes, yes, indeed, yes, indeed.
Man.
Yeah. You find times to laugh. You do. You find time to laugh. For an instant, you get raided tonight, and if you don't have casualties, next day, a couple of days later, things settle down. You find some joke to crack about a guy that was running, to get out the way, that kind of stuff.
So did you get married just before you went over?
Yeah, I got married in August of 43, and I sent for the wife close to Christmas of 43, and she stayed with me until I got ready to ship out, and she returned back home, which was about February of 44.
Now, was she your girlfriend from Arkansas, or had you met her when you got in the service?
Girlfriend from Arkansas.
So now, you have to be a good salesman to convince somebody to, honey, I'm going to war, let's get married.
Yeah, see, that was kind of the norm. It was kind of the thing that happened during the war like that amongst us youngsters. You wanted somebody to remember you, and it didn't bother you if there was a pregnancy before you shipped out. At least that would be somebody to carry the name, those kind of little things. So wife and I, we had known each other from kids, and we intensified our relationship. They called it courting then, as the time neared for me to go to the Army. So once I got in service and come back home furlough, we got married. I proposed to her before I went, and Dad gave her hand in marriage by promise. So when I come back for 8 days of furlough, we got married. I spent 2 nights with her and went back to camp. And then she came to me. Shortly after I went back, we got alerted for going overseas. And I had expected to have my wife come spend some time with me there in the little town. Now everything is passes, canceled, no more furloughs, nothing. Now you're talking about a sick teenage soldier. I got sick. I had a good officer. He's a white guy, though, Lieutenant Reynolds. I don't know what his status is now. He's out of Buffalo, New York. He saw the tremendous change in my whole behavior. So he come to me one day and said, "Son Westbrook," I said, "What's the matter?" I said, "Lieutenant Reynolds, I got married when I went home, and I expected my wife to spend some time with us. I knew we was going overseas." So he said, "I'm going to share something which I ain't supposed to tell you." He said, "We got a lot of processing to do before we go. So go ahead and send for your wife, and I'll give you all the breaks I can." And that's what happened. But it like to prove to be my undoing, because there was soldiers, in preparation, taking all of our time. And they restricted us to the barracks, to the company. We weren't supposed to go to town. Now my wife's in town. 16 years old. I'm 19. I went AWOL every night. That's absent without leave. I'd slip out of the camp. Lieutenant Reynolds knew it. He come to me and said, "You're taking advantage of me, Sergeant Westbrook." Say, "I told you I'd give you all the breaks I could." Saying, "I'm doing that." He said, "But you're going AWL, and that's very unbecoming, and it's not tolerable either. They'll take your rank away from you." So he said, "You put me on the spot." But I apologized, but I kept going. I kept right on going. Forged passes, dodge MPs. I kept going. One thing funny happened. They got ready to have the farewell banquet. The whole regiment was fixed to be shipped out. So everybody brought their wives to this farewell banquet. The brass brought their wives, their girlfriends. And I told my wife, I said, "Come out on the post." I said, "I'm going to show my face, and I'm going to slip out again." So that's what I did. I showed up, but what I didn't know is what they did. God forgive me. See, I took my duffel bag and made him like I was in bed, covered him up. And I'm kind of ashamed when I tell this, because the people had a lot of confidence in me, because I no hero or nothing like that, but I was a decent liver, and the men respected me. And so they called for me over the PR system. "Sergeant Westbrook, front and center, we want you to say grace before we eat." You know where Sergeant Westbrook was? Going to town with his wife. And my buddies told me that my immediate superior came back to the barrack and turned the lights on and said, "Son Westbrook," now here's the duffel bag in the bed, said, "Son Westbrook," said, you're holding up the whole banquet. Said, "They want you to say grace." And that was the duffel bag.
Did you get in trouble for that one, or did they just kind of turn a blind eye?
Ball me out. They didn't take my rank. They balled me out. You know, the fellows kind of understood. The big fellow, your wife out there, you're fixing to leave, this and all that kind of stuff, you know. But I felt bad. I tell you, the reason I felt a little bad because here these fellows was with all this confidence in me as being a straight man, you know, and I'm cheating. I'm gone. I mean, sure enough, gone.
But for a good purpose.
Yes, that is my justification. That's who knows when I'll ever get back home or not.
Was that the night you got to say goodbye to your wife, or was there a different time?
Oh no, different time.
What was that? I mean, that had to be devastating.
Don't even like to think about it now. It's been 50-some years. I sent her home a few days early. Otherwise, I couldn't have stood it. Some of the guys made mistakes and let their wives stay there. It wasn't airplanes. You marched to a point to catch the troop train. And some terrible things happened. Some just couldn't take it. So it was tough. But by me sending her early and not having to say goodbye and jump on the train, I kind of could handle it.
Wow. Did you get letters from her while you were over?
Yeah, and that was a difficult thing. Sometimes she'd write a letter. You mean I'd get that 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, because we were moving, you know, the troops were moving under combat conditions. She's a good girl, though. She lived with my parents all my being away for the most part, almost 2 years, I guess it was. She was my salvation. If she had not been the girl she was, after my experience in Europe, I probably wouldn't be the man that I am.
Big adjustment coming back.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so she was compassionate and understood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've heard some other veterans talk about that, about if their wives, because they weren't there, you come back different. You went away probably just a kid.
Right.
And now you come back an adult.
I think what helped me was we never got used to each other as married people. Say it was just, when I come home on furlough and married, I spent 2 nights with her. Then she come where I was, and the best of it, that was maybe 2 months. And so we hadn't really had time to settle down to real life. So coming back, now we're just getting started, in one sense. That made it more acceptable.
Do you remember coming home, first time you saw her coming home from?
Yeah. And back to this segregation thing, I don't know what kind of sequence you're going to put this in, but you see, once we got off the boat in New York and they sent us to our separation camps, and discharged us, and we headed our separate way. Very unfortunate and very ugly. If you censor this and don't expose it publicly, I'd appreciate it. We black fellas couldn't hardly get on the train or the buses. They'd fill them up with other people, and we'd been to Europe and everywhere else. Make us be on the road for days, trying to get home. I stayed at the bus depot, I think it was 2 days, better part of 2 days. Watched them fill the buses up. But anyhow, coming from Jefferson Barrack, Missouri, went through that routine. Finally, I got home Christmas Eve night. And Christmas Eve night of 45, my wife, now she's 18 plus. I'm 21 plus. She's living with my people. And we live way back in the country. after getting off the main road for transportation, you got to walk. And so this time of year, December, the rains were heavy, and a lot of little dried up situations would gather water, and you'd have to walk. You'd have some kind of tram or a log. So I'd kind of lost my way about that, and I walked in way over in the night. I saw the house and saw the lights, and I had to wade through this water, through this stuff, and I didn't know my way no more. So because I was intended to surprise and walk up and knock on the door, but I had to yell because I had lost my bearing. I didn't know how to maneuver no more. And when she heard my voice, she took off out of that house and didn't try to walk the little logs and things. She just got in that water. Needless to say, it was quite a reunion out in that part of water. Yeah.
Man, it's nice to hear love stories like that. Mm. And this is your wife today?
Yeah.
11 children?
11 children. We got 59 years of marriage. 59 years marriage.
How much had you changed from the time you left to the time that you're coming back? Who left and who came back?
You know, you're trying to monitor yourself is difficult, but a series of things, fits into that. I come back because complete my education. So I had not finished high school when I was drafted, although I had left home. I had left home because once the war got in progress, little jobs were available. I took a job at a defense plant. And if I can just vary a little bit, the government come in, it cleared up a big area to build one of these detainment camps for Japanese. I worked on that. And so, that was trying to, what fitted into this thing, leaving and then coming back. Like I said, the wife was a big factor. And when I come back, I must have been on to complete my education. I went to go and we utilized the GI, the Veteran Administration Educational Program. And the industry fooled us. They said that they was going to allow us to work in the various plants and become machinists and things like that. But they didn't keep that word. So I changed my occupation. I was supposed to come out here then. I had a cousin out here, but I didn't. I think the big thing that made the adjustment and made the severe difference in my departure and my coming back was my commitment to the Lord. My wife was very, very convinced Christian girl. And she having stood up while I was gone, that helped me to get really sincere about renewing my situation with God. And then that led into a growing process in the Lord. And then I wind up accepting a call to the ministry. And I think all of that helped me to make the change and go to a point of maturity and put me on the road to being where I am. There were no desire to be, wild socially and stuff like that, so we didn't have to combat that. She didn't have to combat any kind of infidelity in the marriage, coming out and doing things like that. That was out. So we focused on a family and living a Christian life, not knowing where it would lead so far as our entire social life is concerned, but definitely with that as a priority. And I think that's what.
Did World War II have a big, I mean, I hear some of it. I mean, boy, what a honeymoon and a test period, you know. Honey, see you later, you're going to war. And so you have this strong bond of this woman, you stood behind her, she stood behind you.
Mm-hmm.
Did World War II change the world, I guess the country here in America, for the better? You talked about being segregated, going into the service, coming back, talking about the GI Bill, the companies making promises that there'll be jobs, you can be machinists. Mm-hmm. Did it start to change anything within that, or did that still stay status quo?
To a degree, it made things better. I'll tell you why. The scattering of the people, our GIs come back, they'd been exposed to other things, and they're no longer going back home to stay. Some did, but some didn't, and they find their way in various cities, various states, and it sort of mellowed it to a certain extent. There were the problems, and it just took time for them to really, surface again. But this scattering, for instance, the races, it got bad again, but the races understood each other a little better. Ignorance is the great contributor to racial frictions, what people don't understand about each other. And here you are, you got these fellows depending on each other's, their lives are depending on each other in certain circumstances. Like, for instance, this man that I was telling you about, this white officer that befriended me and told me he cried. He actually literally cried. He called me by my name, not Sergeant, and he said, Thomas, said, I never had any dealings with you people, as they put it. He put his arm around my shoulders, with tears running down his cheeks. He said, I love you. So with that kind of thing, that kind of gaining of knowledge and interacting with each other, it had a positive effect in society. Matter of fact, that's what made it possible for the big civil rights drive to survive. It would have been a bloodbath to one side's advantage if it hadn't been for this kind of understanding and this getting acquainted with people that's not of your race. So it made it better to a great extent. It made it better.
That's the one thing that a lot of the next generation, or the generation in high school right now, don't fully understand, is what it did do to diversify as people moved.
That's
like
right.
You said, they had met people or been places, and everybody. I mean, you think of I grew up in a pretty white community. And if you grow up in that, that's what your knowledge is.
Right.
But now, if you're in the service and you meet people, and now everybody moves around, and like you said, you're side by side and you depend on each other. Oh.
Yeah.
So it does start, doesn't solve everything, but it does start the...
Oh yeah. It puts, for lack of a better term, it changes the flavor a little bit, and then that, of course, makes it possible for growth in that direction.
What was the best part of being in the service for you?
I think the limited traveling, see, it wasn't like it is now where you wrote they do a lot of traveling. We didn't do a lot of traveling other than combat conditions going from one country to the other as we progressed in the war. I think the travel is one thing. The learning to appreciate your blessings is another, because in war conditions and coming in contact with other folk, you find that as bad as things were racially, you find out that this is the best country in the world, and you learn to appreciate that. And that was one of the good things. Next thing, you take a boy 18 and 19 and put a lot of responsibility, throw that at him. He has to grow up. He learns to think. He learns to be independent, make important decisions, and that's advantageous for him in civilian life. So that was one of the other good things. It made me grow up, and mixed with the pride, as I told you that I did enjoy, regardless of the thing. It makes you realize you're somebody, and regardless to the circumstances, that prevails.
You talked about your mom being hesitant of you going in. Was she proud of you when you came home?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I was the only son. Yeah. Yeah, she was proud. I come in with, a little bit of decoration. I had 7 awards, citations, the ribbons that go with it, and standing tall. I was a hero.
When you see the American flag go by, in a parade or wherever, what's that mean to you?
I see the American flag. I should let you hear some of the people that I serve, let you hear them talk. I am a proud fellow. When that American flag go by, I can't hardly, if they're playing that situation, accompanying that flag waving, the national anthem, I still get goose pimples. They have a celebration in respect to my service in the religious realm every year. And Hatch is here, he'll tell you, when that contingent of military personnel, male and female, that's in the congregation, dons their uniforms and strut down that aisle, I get with them. I got to exercise my old sergeant stuff. I got to call them to attention and drill them a little bit. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So American flag means a lot to me. I'd never be one to desecrate it. Regardless how ugly some things get.
What do you think the history books have left out? We need the future generations to know.
One of the things that they left out is a contribution that blacks made to this country. Look how long it took them to recognize the services of the Tuskegee Airmen. And those boys were masters at what they did. Tell you a little incident. The church had some kind of celebration. They wanted to honor the wife and I for our service, and they hired her limousine. White gentlemen drive the limousine. They were supposed to just ride us around at random. So a conversation sprung. He said, were you ever in the military? I said, yeah. He said, where did you go? I said, the European Theater of Operation. Everywhere General Patton went, I went. He said, did you ever hear of the Tuskegee Airmen? I said, sure. We was all over that together. He actually wept. He was driving the limousine. He said, those boys escorted us deep into the enemy territory because they were fighter planes. That time they was flying the P-51s, most advanced fighter that we had. He said, we never lost. He said, I flew B-17s. So I was pilot of B-17. So we never lost a plane when those boys escorted us. And he was in tears. The contributions that blacks made history hadn't been fair to us. And subsequently, that lends itself to misunderstanding between the races because there's a lack of respect. If a people or if a person is depicted as a non-contributor and always a taker, it causes chafing. And that's one of the important things that history left out. It should have been fair. It would have caused a better understanding. I had a chance to go to Europe. I've been there several times since my discharge, but I went the 49th year. I didn't go to 50th year. 50th year, they had this, big celebration that actually did some of the things, minus the shooting that they did during the war, like the invasion and so on. Paratroopers being dropped in a few hours before the HR. I took the wife. I promised myself if I lived to get out of there someday, I'd take her back, take her out there. So I took over a lot of the battlefields there that I was blessed to live through. I took her down to the beach, Normandy Beach, Army Hall, as they call it, when the bloodiest. It didn't mean nothing to her, but it did to me. I revisit the beach. I went into some of the old German bunkers. I didn't know they were so dug in, waiting for us to come out of that one. One of the highlights of that, they got a war museum in that route, going from Paris to down to southern France there, Normandy. And we stopped there, part of the tour was that we stopped there, and it was talking about, it was highlighting men that helped change the course of history. And they spoke of, they had Roosevelt and some of his talks and different ones, the great heroes, the Paddens and so on. What did my heart good? They had Martin Luther King, human size, the film, doing his I Have a Dream speech. Here was people from all over the world, the Orients and everywhere, sitting there, we're sitting there together, and they let Martin Luther King's speech climax the presentation. That did my heart good. They classify him as being among the greats that impact history for a tremendous positive change.
You had to go all the way to Europe for it, though. And that's some irony there, isn't there?
Well, the good thing of that, with touring as it is, he seals conviction with his life. But now the world can feel it. If they can see it, they can hear it, they can read his sincerity. You see, because I was in Czechoslovakia during the war. I had to do some liaison work. And funny to me, funny to us, folks never saw a black man. He was called on the committee. And so that means that dispels some of that ignorance. See, I'm even having that as part of the great thing and saying that these are the people that changed the world, changed the course of history.
It sounds like you have had and are having a good life.
Very good. Thank God. Very good. Things contributed to that, as I said. One of the main factors, good girl, good wife, and my allowing myself to have what I like to think is a good relationship with God. I've been blessed to travel a lot, meet a lot of people, be a part of a lot lot of circumstances. 78 years old. Hopping, but I ain't stopping.
You talked about your mom. What about your dad?
Early separation. Separated for good when I was 4 years old.
So your mom raised you.
Mom was
What was she like?
So what is she like?
Yeah, what was she like?
Wonderful person. She married when she was 14. Dad was 18. It didn't work. She wound up with 2 kids. And she worked hard. I know the time when she worked for a whole week's work for $2.50. She had to try to keep a roof over our head, feed us. One thing that stands out about Mom greatly to me, it was a shoe that was popular among the males. Both kids, teenagers and adults. The brand was Tomac and they had the Cuban heels. Mom took a whole week's work and bought me a pair of those shoes.
Great woman.
I'd like to tell you something. I don't know whether you want to expose this on film or not. Maybe I wish you wouldn't, probably.
Do you want me to stop?
Yeah, well, you can censor it if it comes out wrong.
Okay.
Speaking of Mom, we did some time in my growing up in Monroe, Louisiana, and Mom was doing this domestic work and cooking for this Jewish family. And that's where she was making it 2.5 a week, and they would allow her to bring the leftover food home. These Jewish people, that's in the early 30s, maybe like 31 or 2, before the Hitler thing got going in Germany, they were her relatives were these Jewish people Mama worked for. Relatives were German Jews, and they come visited their relative in Louisiana. Their name was Lemnis or something like that. It's quite good. Those people tried their best when they got ready to go back to Germany, take my mom. They fell in love with her. They wanted to take my mom, and we 2 black kids, because mom was almost as fair as you are, complexion-wise, but we were black. And they wanted to take Mama and us 2 black kids. I'm sure glad she didn't go.
No kidding. A twist of fate.
Yes, yes. But Mom was a wonderful person. Later on, she became a Christian. She was not a Christian at first. Later on, she became a Christian and worked hard, great influence in my life.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming down and sharing this with us. Because again, it is a part of history that you have to look for it to find it. It's not out there in the open, and everybody has different. I'm going to stop the recording now. So let me back up and ask that. So when you went to basic training and the different camps, how segregated were they, and what type of issues did you have to deal with?
It was severely segregated. I've told you that the officers were white. But when it come to off-duty hours, we black soldiers were forbidden to ride in the front of the buses on the post. And I remember it quite well. There was a unit of infantry that was made up of Caucasian Mississippians. And that was a terrible riot because of that. Some people got hurt. Terrible riot, because they were going to relegate black troops to the back of the bus, and black troops resented and resisted that. So as much as God helped us to stay together and fight and help crush the Japanese and the Germans, it wasn't without that racial friction and ugly things that came out of that. Tell you this, nobody, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Japanese weren't very popular, the Americans. And I mentioned to you that before being drafted, I worked as a construction laborer building that detention camp down in Roa, Arkansas. After the war, I went back home and stayed some 10 years before coming out here. I had a cousin out here that had been trying to get me to come out all the time. I come out here after 12 years back home. I think it was 12, when I had a big family. I had 6 kids then coming out. After I acknowledged my calling to the ministry, that intensified, and I gave up what I was doing to come here. My cousin was in the ministry, and he said it was a brighter future out here for me, even to make a living for my family. So I came out. No skills, no lot of money, needed a place for my family to live. I'd answer the ads, and because of the no job, no credit established, everything was down. One day, after answering some ads, I come by a house in Tacoma on I Street, 21st and I, right across the street from the big school there called Macaba. And there was this for sale sign on this house. And there was also a rental truck backed up there. And it was being loaded with the people's household stuff. I walked over and asked the guy about selling the house. He happened to be a Japanese. Same thing, he said, I can't sell it to you on credit because you got no job. And I definitely didn't have the cash. I told him what I could pay him down and how much I could give him money. He said, I can't do that. Happened his door was open, and I looked through there, and there was a Foot Locker that was waiting to be loaded, had written on it, Roa, Arkansas. I said, hey, who here know anything about Roa, Arkansas? He said, I do. He said, my whole family, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, was shipped down to Roa, Arkansas. Quite a coincidence, I worked as a construction laborer to build those barracks. I said, and I was there when they brought the first train load of you guys in there. He said, what? I said, what I'd like to know is how did they finally allow you people to go to the Army? He said, well, some changes took place. And he said, I went to the Army. I said, I know that you had an outfit overseas in Europe, because I met some of you. So your first assignment was in Italy and Sicily. He said, yeah. I said, we had gotten in the heart of Germany when you fellows wind up over there and finally come and joined us. He says, 442nd Infantry. I said, yeah. He said, how much you say you could pay me on this house? I said, a little bit. I told him, he said, what can you pay me per month? I told him. He said, the house is yours, and I carried a contract. I bought lots of houses, and I still got that house. But you see, they were so segregated against those Japanese troops, they didn't care if they perished. They put them up there with some of the most crack soldiers in the roughest terrain, some of the roughest terrain of Italy, or Sicily. But the little boys kept fighting and fought their way out of there. 50% casualties, and every one of them the whole unit was decorated. So.
It's interesting because, again, there's this dual, you're American, you're not American, you're this, you're not that. So they did that with the Japanese-American citizens, put them in the worst areas. You talked about the Tuskegee. That was designed to fail.
That's right.
They were supposed to fail, but
Absolutely.
they were so good that
It prevailed.
they didn't know what to do then.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, I guess that's where you do see some positive that came out of the travesties that happened.
Absolutely.
It's interesting because growing up, my perception would be that prejudice was more Southern than out here. You wouldn't see it out here as much, but that's a pretty naive view of, I assume, of the world.
It's a covert thing in some of the other areas. You see, it's very blatant down south, but it's kind of a covert thing in some other areas. But, as I said earlier, when people had the opportunity to really interact with somebody different to them, different race, there was a lot of good came out of that as a result of that. So lots of good. The civil rights thing couldn't have lasted and prevailed like it did if it hadn't been that there were other races, particularly the Caucasians.
When you were driving truck, when the red ball was going, did that start to break down segregation? I mean, even though it was a majority of Black Americans, African Americans driving the trucks.
Mm-hmm. It brought respect.
Oh, it did?
It definitely brought respect. Matter of fact, I was looking at a book that I have that I bought because I lost all of my stuff in a fire. But I saw General Patton decorating a black boy. See, and that happened. See, the respect. We had a little paper called Stars and Stripes. I think it's Stars and Stripes still, because he's been here since. And they said this. They finally said this. The editors. They said, "Got to give credit to these black truck jockeys." They call us Negroes then. Say, because it was so evident in the things that they was doing, and the fellows learned to appreciate it. And so,
So recognition did take place.
Oh, yes.
I know there are certain things like categories where they just didn't give people awards or they didn't deal with anything.
That's right.
So, but the Red Ball Express
They
acknowledged it?
they awarded. They got that's history, and I've just bought this book lately, because as I said, a lot of my stuff got burned up in the fire, and it shows that yet in the current history, Patton decorating that boy. They don't go into all the details, but the respect, and regardless of the race, they respected them boys for that job because they were cowboys. They was tough. They were tough. See, because they'd have to ride solo sometime because of the man shortage. They couldn't have two men in the trucks, round the clock, 24/7s, yeah. And they just did look like the impossible.
And you keep referring to them, but you were one of those cowboys. I don't know if you remember that or not, but I know you're a humble person.
I don't want to depict myself as being. I tell the wife all the time when they go in, and here lately they're showing some active footage, what was forbidden before they saw it. I was looking at where we were a couple of days ago during that breakthrough in Belgium. And what they call Bastogne. And I saw exactly. I said, "Honey, I don't want nobody to think." I said, I was very much a part of that. I said, "But I don't want nobody to think that I think myself a hero because some fellows had it so much worse than I did. They had it so much worse. Mm-hmm. If you want to, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll have him go get that big thing. Just let you see it. Would you like to see it?"
Did Adolf take him over? Yeah, he's over. My brother is taking digital photos of all that.
Okay. Well, good.
But I want to go see it here in a minute.
That's good.
You were decorated.
7 awards or 7 citations. That's not like Silver Stars and stuff like that. It represents 5 major campaigns. You get a star for every one of those. I have them listed here. 5 major campaigns. Then I got the Meritorious Award, and I got the Good Conduct Award. And then there was a post situation that was awarded my outfit, and I think it was called the Philippine President Unit Situation Citation. What is that? Five battle stars. 5 battle stars. I like to call them battle stars. 5 battle stars. That was one for Normandy, one for the Rhineland, and one for the Ardennes, which we call the Battle of the Bulge. And that was Central Europe and Northern France, and Meritorious Award, and Good Conduct Medal, and then this situation from the Philippine President Unit citation. So about seven, recognitions there. But that's not like the Silver Star and stuff like that.
The good conduct one, I assume they didn't know about you going AWOL to see.
Oh no, they didn't put that on my record. Thank God. They didn't put that on my
Might be
record.
taking that one away from me.
Man, that was a tough. See, what I looked out the window one day and they had us on restriction, and my wife hadn't heard from me. I couldn't call her, and she's out there waiting snow. Somebody said, "Who is this woman out here? This young woman?" I looked out the window and they had me on CQ, charge of quarters. I looked and said, "That's my wife. I'm out of here."
Those guys must have had fun razzing you after that one.
Yeah, they did. They did. So I'm out of here. Wife and I revisit that area, Camp Pickett, Virginia, our 40th anniversary. Yeah, just can't hardly recognize anything, but we visit there.
It's interesting because you're like so many veterans that I talk to. Here you're saying, "Oh yeah, I got 7 of them. It's not a Silver Star or anything like that." It's 7 more than I have. Okay, I never had to put my life on the line to go serve my country. Too young and too old. What you did, and what I hear from so many veterans that, I talk about hero. No, not hero. Just doing my job.
That's it. That's where you see it. So you're not trying to win nothing. You're just doing your job, doing the best you can. This evolves into these citations and awards, but you're just trying to do your job.
It's amazing. I heard somebody say one time, it's amazing how much can get done if you don't care who gets credit for getting
That's
it done.
it. You're not thinking about nobody getting credit. Big job is the primary objective is trying to stay alive. You got to do this job and do it well. And so, come on, let's do it, fellas. And woe to you if you don't help me do it.
That's the one thing I forgot. I read somewhere that driving truck, sometimes you would take, I can't remember what it was, but they put the bale or whatever on the floor, just hoping that if you caught a mine or something that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Let me tell you something about that. We were not amphibious. We didn't have amphibious vehicles, see, during the early days of the invasion. As I said, we went in about 8 days after, D-Day. But we had been ordered to waterproof our vehicles. We drove the 2.5-ton GMCs, big fellas, and full of 1-ton trailer. We were not amphibious vehicles like that some come from the factory. We call them quacks and ducks. He was just as much at home in the water as he was on land, see, right? But we weren't that. But we were ordered, and they took us to South Wales before we come across the channel, before the invasion got started, and given some waterproof goop. And we had to waterproof those trucks all over, spark plugs, and do a snorkel thing from the exhaust pipe, and run this snorkel up, and waterproof that situation, because we were not amphibious. And they tell you, they make you do your own. A team of guys is going to be in this truck and tell you it's up to you how well you do it. See, because if you don't do your homework, when we drop you in that channel, you're going to be a sitting duck out there if you don't do it right. So that's what we did. The whole truck would sink. See, it's like you see these ground troops that come up in that thing, drop that in gate, and they wade out the water. They did our trucks like that. See, from the big ship, the big Liberty ship, they winched that whole truck on these little landing situation. And once you get close to the shores they can get, they drop that in gate and order you out. And our whole trucks, we'd activate the 3 axles, make them live front wheel, and that middle situation, differential, and then that other transmission thing. And the truck would sink, and you'd stand up in your seat and hold the steering wheel with your hands and head toward the shore. They have never, of all of my watching the drama of invasion, and particularly the Army Hall Beachhead, they have never shown that. They have never, ever shown that. We had to stand up in the seat, and the truck submerged, and we hold the wheel down there because we had everything active, the front wheels and everything going, and climb that beach, that shore. But we made it. We made it.
You're in there, and the bow of the little landing craft drops down, and then
That's it. And you getting out. See, the sailor's in command of that. Out.
no.
You ain't gonna tell him no, because he wants to do about face and head out of there, So,
And are you fully loaded? The truck?
oh no.
So you're coming in empty.
Coming in empty.
Okay, so you got a little advantage, not much. though.
Right.
I mean,
Got a little advantage. Yeah.
wow.
You ain't got time to think. You don't have time to think. You just got to do. The guy said out, so you better head out.
And I assume the teams that didn't waterproof theirs well enough.
I glimpsed and saw one out there with the water bashing him. I don't know what happened to him. Said he went dead. Said, but you ain't got time to look for nobody then. You're trying to get to shore.
Man, yeah, I would want to be going as fast as I could to get up that beach.
See, and it's a slow grind because you're plowing through all that sand, you see. All the sun, they disperse you. You go to the right, you go to the left. Don't want to make an easy target. Once you get ashore, take your foxhole, camouflage your vehicle, wait for orders.
At that point is when you knew that you really were. I mean, you do all this training and they tell you you're going to be going to war. But I assume that hitting that beach was your wake-up call that this isn't.
It's just real. That this is real. That this is real. That's what got on me. I said, these guys ain't playing. I mean, I was reason. I said, the only accident here is if they miss you. I told myself that. I mean, I really told myself, these guys ain't playing. These fellas trying to kill me. So the only accident here is if they miss me.
We interviewed one ball turret gunner, and Gil Langdon out of Spokane, and he said, he says, in all the training, he says, honest to goodness, in all the training, they taught us how to fire and all that. He says, I never once in my mind imagined that they would be firing back at me.
Yeah.
He says, when I first got up there, though, I knew.
That's it. Did they mean it? That's it.
Let me get you unmiked here.